Not only is that looks a lot different than somebody who and so before we so what is semi-freeforming? What happens if that happens if you have a with that, go ahead and subscribe, turn on your notifications so you know whenever so if you're with that, go ahead and subscribe, turn on your notifications for self-love, self-growth, and maturity, and retaining So another thing that you want to consider before you start semi-freeforming is that Hey y'all, welcome back to Holistic Flow. I am your girl Lolo, and today I'm going to be talking about things that you want to be aware of before you start your semi-freeform journey. I feel like this video is very overdue because I've been asked a lot, like, what are the kind of like dangers of semi-freeforming, or why people sometimes fail with semi-freeforming. And I've been kind of oblivious to that whole idea because when I hear people say that, I'm like, dangers? There's nothing dangerous about semi-freeforming. There's only pros, right? Well, it depends on how you see it, and it also depends on many other things that I'll get to in this video. But just because I haven't been through those things doesn't mean that other people won't go through those things. And I felt like I shouldn't advocate so much for semi-freeforming or promote the idea just because it works for me, not knowing or being oblivious to the fact that it could be dangerous for other people because of these things. But before we get into it, if you are new here to my channel, hello. Here on Holistic Flow, we are creating a safe space, for self-love, self-growth, and maturity, and we're taking a journey towards an overall better mind, body, and spirit connection. So if you're with that, go ahead and subscribe, turn on your notifications so you know whenever I upload a new video. After you have done that, thank you so much, and let's get into it. So what is semi-freeforming? Well, it is when you don't have traditional locks. Traditional locks is when you have a set maintenance routine. You probably retwist every month or every 2 weeks. However, it's somewhere in between that and freeforming. Now, freeforming is when you completely started with a bush, just an afro, and you just continue to wash your hair, not separated, no parts, no nothing. Now, semi-freeform is anything that is in between those two. There's honestly a wide range of like what semi-freeform locks could look like, but to most people they look like, you know, puffy roots. They're usually thicker and they usually don't look cylindrical like traditional locks do. So right now I have in these chunky twists, which I have a video coming soon how I did this. I don't usually style my hair like at all. I usually leave it down, but I decided to do something different this time. You can't really see the state of my locks, but if you've watched other videos, it doesn't look like I maintain my roots a lot, but I'll get into what I do for my maintenance. However, I've been semi-freeforming for about 2 years now. My locks are about 2 years and 5 months. So I started semi-freeforming 6 months into my lock journey. I started with 74 locks. I just stopped retwisting altogether. I just did 2-strand twists without retwisting, or sometimes I even did braid outs. Other times I just washed it and didn't do anything, any type of style. But soon enough, I got tired of the twist outs and braid outs. So my routine became just wash my hair, pop my locks. I would still separate. I wouldn't part with a comb. I would just separate to where my hairs usually go, pop my locks, which is the process of that separation, put my moisturizing routine stuff on, and then air dry, and then I was good. Until I realized a few months after I stopped retwisting that I was having a little bit of thinning in the front perimeter of my head. They were 2 specific locks on either side of my head. I combined them because I thought, okay, if I combine my locks, it will stop the thinning. Somebody had commented on the video where I combined my locks saying, or there was actually a couple of comments, which I'm very thankful for the comments, saying, hey, like, you know, have you ever considered that your hair might grow away from your locks? And I was like, no, I haven't. Ever since then, I realized what works for me. That is the first thing I would consider when starting your semi-freeform journey. The possibility that your new growth might grow away from your locks. So I've watched a couple of people who know a lot more about locks than I do. One being the digital loctician's videos. She is a loctician, I'm not. So she was saying in one video that if your hair grows away from your locks, that means that when your new growth grows in and you don't retwist, that means you don't have a maintenance routine to where you put that new growth in a section. That new growth will look like breakage, but then also it will grow out of the lock and it won't naturally grow into the lock, basically. And there's no process that allows that hair to safely merge with the lock that is in that same section. So it might look like breakage around that perimeter. If it's mostly, for me, it was mostly the perimeter of my head. Around the other parts of my head, it happened, but not that much, right? Some people's hair naturally grows into their locks. When they semi-freeform, they don't have a problem with the lock looking like it's thinning or looking like it's breaking off. However, for me, I had to develop a maintenance routine in order for my locks to not look like they were thinning, especially around the perimeter of my head. Something that worked for me was braiding my new growth into my locks. I have a whole video on this topic, and the video is right here, and I explain a lot more in depth what it is and how I do it. And also, if you are not educated about people having different types of growth patterns, I guess you could say, then you'll think that it's just breakage. But it's not necessarily breakage, it's just that the hair is not growing into the lock. So the hair stops locking at the root. When it stops locking, you basically have two patterns of hair growth, and you can repair that by either braiding the new growth into the lock, or some people actually use the crochet method where they crochet their new growth into their lock, or retwisting. Now, like I said, semi-freeform locks can look like so many different things. So it's just finding that method that works for you. Now, another thing that you might want to consider before you start semi-freeform locks is if you want to start a semi-freeform lock journey because you think that it's going to be less maintenance than retwisting every month, or it's going to be less time consuming, it's going to be less money in your pockets. It could be all of those things, but you have to consider that it may take more maintenance than what you expect because you may not know how much maintenance that you need until you go into the journey, honestly. I thought that I could just wash my hair and then separate my locks and then boom, I'm semi-freeforming, but it didn't work like that. Now I braid my new growth into my locks once a month. I wash my hair every 2 weeks, so I guess you could say every other time that I wash my hair, I'll do my maintenance routine. Now there's no, I guess, pattern that I have with that. It's just I do it as needed. So if you're going into it because you think it's going to be less maintenance, that could be true. It could also save you money. It will also save you time. However, to what extent is unknown until you go through that process and you see what maintenance routine that you might need. Also, something that I learned from watching videos of people who know more than me about locks is that the coarser your hair is naturally, the more likely your hair will lock when you semi-freeform. But the finer that your hair texture is, the less likely it is that it will lock naturally without any maintenance. Possibly like go into it already examining your hair, knowing if you have fine or coarse textured hair, and that could give you better ability to perceive what your maintenance routine will look like when you start semi-freeforming. So this goes into another consideration that you'll want to make, which is how fast your hair locks. How fast your hair locks depends on the coarseness or the fineness of your texture of hair. Coarser hair is coarser or rougher to the touch. That doesn't mean dry. It just means rougher to the touch. Fine hair is softer to the touch. That doesn't mean more moist. It just means softer to the touch. People who have fine hair are more likely that if they start semi-free-forming, they'll have a big gap of just loose hair that hasn't locked yet, and then the lock will start. And that could be a sign that your hair possibly lead to breakage over time. Not only does it not look appealing to a lot of people when you have that gap, but also it can lead to your lock weighing your hair down. Because if you think about it, like our lock is just a bunch of hairs over months, over years of time, locked in together. And they can get heavy when your hair gets long. That space where your hair could be locking, but it's not, is being compromised, and it could become weak, it could become more fragile. And I think that's where you may see a lot of people who have finer hair or even less dense hair of their new growth, and then they have their lock that's kind of like hanging on by a thread. So if your hair does not lock fast on its own, then you might want to consider or reconsider semi-free-forming your locks. Okay, stop right there. Do you know that you lack discipline in your mental or spiritual journey? Do you want to live life with less stress and more focus, and an overall clearer goal for yourself towards your vision for the future? If so, the Holistic Fit Meditation membership would be great for you. As a Holistic Fit Meditation member, we practice 3 times a week together, live on Zoom or on demand on your own time. We'll practice breath work techniques to get your mind into the flow state for increased concentration. We'll practice mind and body awareness, bringing awareness to this present moment to eliminate symptoms of depression and anxiety, and also practice discipline, adhering to our framework for transformation so that you can do the self-work on your own without guidance, so that you can build up that mental discipline for yourself. See, I help beginner meditation practitioners deepen their practice so that they can develop a life with less stress, more clarity, more joy, and an overall more holistically fit lifestyle. I'm not teaching meditation. I'm helping create transformation in your life, and that's what I want to do. So if you want to become a Holistic Fit Meditation member, go to my website, holisticfitmeditation.com, and click on memberships, or go to the description box and click on the link that says become a Holistic Fit Meditation member. And I hope to see you practicing soon. So another thing that you want to consider before you start your semi-freeform journey is that you probably have different densities and or hair textures throughout your head. It may be that the hair on the crown of the head is a lot less dense than the hair around the back. So for example, when I first started my locks, my goal was to make all of my locks very similar in size. What ended up happening is, even though my parts were pretty much, they were pretty similar all around my head, in the front of my head, my locks became larger than in the back of my head. And I believe that is because my hair at the top of my head is thicker than my hair at the bottom of the head. So I have a higher density around here, around the crown, than I do around there. My hair texture around the crown is looser than my hair texture on the bottom. And I know that from doing months and months of wash and goes and twist outs during my natural hair journey. So how did you get to know your hair before you started your locks? Think back to your natural hair journey. And I think that can be pretty important, because that's a time to get to know your hair type, texture, density. And if you don't know these things, that is perfectly fine. Okay, we're all on a journey of getting to know ourselves better. But if you did get a chance to examine it, think about that once you go to semi-freeform, because some people find that once they go to semi-freeform, they may want to only retwist the perimeter of their head. So your maintenance routine could look different for different parts of the hair, and that's okay too. Because for me, there are some parts toward the back of my head that lock just fine without me having to braid my new growth into my hair. It's really only the perimeter of the head that grows away from my locks. So a big thing that you want to consider, this will be a huge factor, is how mature your locks currently are. How far into your lock journey are you, or have you started your locks? If you've already started a lock journey, you actually do have an advantage in this sense, because you sort of understand how your hair locks. Because if you haven't already locked your hair, you could look and see, your different textures and stuff like that. But until you go on the lock journey, your locks are a totally different being. I won't say animal because I don't want to call locks an animal, but they're a totally different being when it's in locks because it's the most natural state that our hair can be in. Just think about it. If you leave the hair alone, it naturally wants to tangle up. And soon you'll have locks without doing anything. That's what freeform locks are. Until you start that lock journey and examine even like the type of products that you would want to use or the maintenance routine that you want to use, you know more about your hair. And you would be able to decipher all of the previous things that I just said when you already start. Starting off with a clean slate has its advantages too. You could say more so of the learning advantages. I've seen people start off semi-freeform locks from day one and they did great. It's all trial and error at the end of the day. So my last thing to be mindful of before you start your semi-freeform journey is that nothing is really set in stone. Nothing about the semi-freeform journey, whatever journey, freeform, the traditional lock journey, is going to be known before you do it. You just have to do it and find out. Most things are going to be trial and error, even if you do see a loctician. Even though a loctician may understand hair more than you, building that relationship with yourself is better when you have that relationship with your hair and you get to know every single detail about your hair better than anybody else could. And that's all part of the journey in and of itself. So there's no way to exactly know how the locks are going to turn out when you make certain decisions. It's just the journey. The journey is the journey. And I just want to encourage people to be mindful of these things, but not scare anybody off from semi-freeforming. I love semi-freeforming. It definitely has its pros for me, but I just realized that even though for me, there are mostly pros, pretty much all pros, that is not the case for everybody. And that's perfectly okay because nobody can do your lock journey better than you can do it yourself. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and I hope to see you in the next one. Let me know what other videos you want to see in the comment section down below. And I'll see you in the next video. Until then, I'm sending peace your way, love your way, and joy to you, your family, and your friends. All right, y'all. Peace.